I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman, Chairman of the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee. The American Fire Service is rich in tradition and culture. A firefighter's life is filled with many emotional highs and lows. Stories of major fires, national disasters, medical calls, firehouse living, and family life are often verbally shared from one generation to another. Many times these stories are lost forever when a firefighter passes away. In an effort to preserve these stories, in 2019, the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee launched a new program of recording audio-video of our retirees' lives. These stories will be shared on our website, gfhbc.org. In 2020, we did not record because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please listen as these firefighters share their life experiences with all of us.
I'm Richard Reichl. I got on the fire department in April 1st, 1964. Came from the post office. I was working at the post office at O'Hare Field in Chicago. And me and my wife were living there, and she hated Chicago. And after I had been in service, I found out the rest of the world doesn't have to put up with winters like that. So I decided we were going to look for something else. So I wrote to the fire department in Greensboro, and Chief Boucher responded and asked me to send a picture, photograph. So I did that, and he said, "When can you come down and talk to me?" You know. So it was probably a month later from when I started the communications that I actually came down, and I guess he interviewed me, sort of, you know, kind of not for the job really, but just to see how I was feeling about different things. So he said, "Well," he says, "you look like a good candidate." He said, "But you got to have a physical." And I said, "Well, when can I do that?" He says, "Well, let me get on the phone." He called Dr. Klutz. Dr. Klutz? I said, "What's this?" Anyway, he said, "Can you see this guy? Because he's just in town for a little while." So I went over there to send me over to Dr. Klutz, and he cleared me and everything. And I went back there and I said, "Well, what do I do now?" He said, "Well, when can you come to work?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I have to go back and turn in my resignation at the post office and all." So I went and did that, and he says, "Can you come back April 1st?" So that's what. And then I got to thinking about him saying April 1st. I said, this guy don't believe in April Fool's jokes, and I done resigned and moved. I spent about 13 years of my career at 5 different times. There was no other requirements that I knew of. I just had that physical from Dr. Klutz, and then I come to work on April 1st and started with and I met up at Central Station because I didn't know where the training center was. Met there, and Richard Johnson was in my class, and he was going to drive out to the training center. I said, "Well, can I ride with you?" So we rode out there together. Okay, some of the other people in my class were Johnny Teeters was in my training class. Glenn Johnson, Bob Ivy, a fellow Navy guy. Let's see. So Glenn Johnson, Richard Johnson, Teeters, Latta, Irvin Latta was in there. I'm probably, Clarence Hilliard was in our class too. And there were several other. I think there was probably 19 or 20 maybe, I can't remember. I think my time in the military, I served on 2 ships, and we had fires on those ships. And so I wasn't afraid to go into a fire. We didn't have the kind of equipment. We just had the OBAs, oxygen breathing apparatus, which was a rebreather, which now I look back on it, that was a dangerous thing. But anyway, we fought fires that way. And I went through fire training in basic, and then on the ships I was on, I must have been low man on the totem pole, because I ended up getting fire training, a week of fire training every time we ended up hitting port. So they had to send somebody to the fire schools every time. So I did that at least 3 times while I was with the fleet. Now, I don't remember too much about stories in training. Like you say, it was pretty serious. And of course, this was before bunker gear and all. We just had them raincoats. And you got soaking wet every time, so you'd have to go home and dry your clothes and everything. You talk about the Palm Pier ladder. I loved it. I thought it was a cool thing, and I wanted to do it twice. But you know, some of the guys were scared of that, and it did move a little bit. You know, when you hooked it up on the windowsill upstairs. It was kind of tricky, but I didn't really feel like I was anything particular, you know. I think about it later now. I think about it later that if I was special, I was one of the few. And I found out later that I was one of the few. There was a lot of people, a lot of departments that were not professionals. So I was one of the few professional firefighters. So I thought that was kind of special. Yeah, my first assignment after training was the new Station 5, which was on Friendly Avenue, and I was assigned to Truck 5, which was a brand new piece of equipment. My first captain was Captain Clarence Beale, which his nickname was Boat, and he was a big old fella, and pretty good guy. I liked him. And on this first company, Elton Spainhour was our first driver. Levi Miller was second driver, and myself and Irv Latta was the workers. So that was our first company, and then we had engine 4 in the same house, you know, and it was a brand new house. So I mean, it was nasty. We cleaned every work day for months, trying to get the place cleaned up and everything after it had been built. Boat. He was pretty good, but he also was a salesman over at General Tire. So he talked me into buying my first set of tires from him, and they didn't last too good. I don't know if he got me the cheap brand or what, but then they wore out in about 19,000 miles, and he talked me into a set of recaps, and they actually lasted better. They must have been harder rubber or something. But then later on, I found out that these things were not that good, and I went with Sears and got my first set of radial tires. We always cooked together at Firehouse 5 when I was there, and a lot of times people bring stuff from home. People had gardens and stuff, and I started working with my father-in-law planting a garden, and so we always brought something if we could, and some of us went out and hunted and brought some squirrels in every once in a while. me and Levi Miller were big squirrel hunters. So, but we'd have to bring in a bunch of them because there'd be 21 of us at Station 5 because we had the chief's car there, and there'd be at least 6 people on each unit. So sometimes, and then we had guests a lot of time come in. So we'd have a big lunch meal. Well, I think I was better than some of them, but yeah. You talk about cooking at the firehouse. I guess my favorite thing to fix was cube steak, mashed potatoes, and carrots. I'd cut up carrots and cook them, and instead of putting salt and pepper and stuff on, I put some honey in there when I cooked them, and cooked them for about an hour, and they were good. Everybody raved about them carrots. And of course, every time during the summer, when I had a lot of rows of green beans, I'd bring a bag of green beans in about every day, and we'd cook them. So we save a little money that way. Well, as far as your sleeping quarters, I never experienced the cubicles, so I was always in a dorm, and I didn't have any problem with that. Of course, now sometimes you'd have to go shake somebody's bed because they were snoring so bad. We had one down when I was at 4, he would have a chair next to his bed, and he'd bang that chair on the floor, wake everybody up. That was kind of aggravating. As far as getting together with families, we did some of that because, like I say, I hunted with some of these guys, mainly Levi Miller, Steve Faust, Jimmy T. Ritchie. And it was safer be behind a tree when Jimmy was out there. But we hunted a lot of times down at Uari and the Sand Hills. And then we'd get together sometimes for a meal, our families and stuff, you know. Yeah, I remember having it at my house one time. We ate some deer roast my wife fixed, and Jimmy and his wife, and Levi and his wife, and Steve and his wife were there, and we all had a meal together. Well, I think it's good. It's a good thing that you're doing as far as recording some of our experiences and some of our thoughts. I know some of the guys are probably pretty reluctant to say anything, and some of them probably don't want to do an interview, but that doesn't seem to bother. It doesn't bother me. I'm kind of a lot of anxious for my kids to see this, because they don't. Some of the stuff I probably never told them. So it'd be good to get back to them, and maybe they'll have some input. As far as the firefighters taking time out and visiting with a retiree, I think that's important. That to be able to meet them all. I don't remember people's names a lot of times. I forget as soon as they tell me, but it would be interesting if they mentioned to the retiree where they came from, what their background is, and that would be an interesting thing to learn, and that might help you remember that certain person. Although, go ahead. Add to this, although I very seldom have visited a firehouse. I just don't think about it, and like I say, it's all a whole different people. I mean, everybody who I worked with is probably gone. I've been retired 32 years. I do remember some retirees coming by the station and introducing themselves, and I remember them from that because they lived in the neighborhood, a lot of them, and so I do remember some of them coming by, and we stopped and talked and everything. And of course, a lot of times we'd get a call, like especially down at 4, we'd get a call and say, lock the door for us. So, if I was invited to a firehouse for, just what you call a dedication or something like that, yeah, I would try to attend if there was something else going on. If there was, I'd try to cancel it. As far as the first call, I don't remember. We wrote a lot of calls. We had the boxes back then, so we wrote a lot of calls, and we're more or less somebody was mailing a letter in the firebox. But the first big call I remember was out on High Point Road. Some trucking company was out there, and we raised the ladder, but and run water. And of course, the building was on fire all over, so we were just protecting the exposures and stuff. So, well, fire boxes were all over the city. I think the main part of the city, and they were all numbered. The fire boxes were, and we had a ticker tape, on the counter at the firehouse, and it would punch out numbers. So you could read it, or you could count the bells, either way. But you knew what fireboxes were in your territory. That was part of just, it was easy to learn. And then we'd go to the firebox. As far as medical calls, we had a few while I was working, but mainly it was fire calls. But the few we did have, most of the time they weren't, that important, or not that important. They were important, but they were people that were already gone, and we were just there to kind of hang around to help EMS get them out. I think the firefighters are the first line of defense as far as medical. They can get there quicker than the ambulance a lot of times. A lot of times the ambulance is stationed somewhere even away from their house, and or they may be on another call. So it's probably better to send the firemen to a medical call and kind of critique it and see if they really need an ambulance. And a lot of these people will refuse an ambulance because they have to end up paying for it. As far as changes in the operations, I probably observed a lot of changes, but nothing really comes to mind that I would think would be important. When 9/11 happened, I had already retired, but I so happened I was at a flea market that day. That was a Tuesday, because they had a flea market in Lexington on Tuesdays, and I'd go down there and shop and stuff and just look for stuff. And people had televisions and stuff, so they had the televisions on, and of course I seen the first airplane hit the thing. I said, that ain't no accident. That was deliberate. They kept airplanes out of big cities. There was the people at the airport. They had them go all the way around, because a lot of times when me and my wife flew into Chicago, they'd take us way over the lake to come in. So we weren't over any kind of buildings, So I knew that for a fact that wasn't an accident. And then of course, when the second plane hit, I just had to leave. Drive on home. As far as my ancestry, I'm German and Russian. But Russia took over the country where my mama's daddy was from. It was called Belarus, and it was the northern, and they also called it White Russia because it was near the Siberian line, and so it was a pretty cold place. But my grandfather came here in 1903 from Russia. His last name was Donisage. Well, they say that was, but they could have changed it at Ellis Island because people spoke different languages and they were just reading it off if he had papers or not. Some of the people came in didn't have papers, didn't have any identification. And then my other grandfather on the Reichl side, he came in the same year, 1903, and he was what they called an indentured servant because he didn't have money to pay for his ticket. So he had to work for this company in Chicago, which was Piper's Bakery. So he worked for them to pay back his transport from to America from Austria. Part of Austria and Germany were together at that time. And his daddy never came. He stayed in Austria and fought, I think, in the First World War for the German side. But he was an old man at that time. He was probably in his 60s. So I figured he was probably in supply or something in the back of the thing. So as far as people I looked up to in the fire department, some of my captains were really influential. Like say Boat Beal, Paul Brown. He was a good guy, a really good guy. Royal, I forget his first name. Berman Royal, yeah. I'd end up driving for him sometimes when we'd get a call, and he was a good guy. Real. If I didn't know exactly where I was going, he'd point it out for me. And like I say, some of the other firefighters I worked with kind of helped me a lot as far as doing stuff, learning stuff. When we first went to work, you hadn't asked the question. When we first integrated, I was in one of the first places to integrate, which I went down to. We went on 3 shifts at that time too, and so I went down to 4, and they left 4 of the black firefighters. No, 6. They left 6 black firefighters that supposedly knew the territory. So we had Robert Carmen and OJ. As far as working with other races, I was kind of used to that because we were integrated in the Navy. So I didn't see any difference. It seemed like every time I went to take the captain's exam, seemed like I started getting worse and worse as far as my grade. I don't know why that was, but I don't hold it against anybody. In fact, I think I talked to the chief. Went and talked to. I think Boucher was chief then. Went and talked to him and said, I'm not bitter about not making captain, even though I was 5th on the list. But they went through the list and picked the top 4 or something like that, and I got left behind every time. So, and I think there was just 2 of us left on the list before they had another test. As far as heartbreaking, not particularly. experienced too much like that, but I remember crawling in several fires and crawling over people that were under the debris, and we didn't find them till afterwards. I don't particularly remember any proudest moments, and I probably was ready to retire when I did retire, because I had stuff to do, and I didn't really want to stay any longer. I could have stayed longer and made a little more money, but 30 years was enough. Well, as far as the deaths of people, it did affect me when Jesse got killed, and he was on our call, but they called out Engine 2 because we were answering a false alarm at one of those boxes. So we were away from the house, and they went on to Lee Street, and then he ended up either getting backed over or we don't know exactly what happened. As far as working with the female firefighters, I did. First female we worked with was Edie Bailey, and she was a wild one, I tell you. She just told some really off-colored stories, and I don't know if she was trying to shock us or what, but she was funny. And then I worked with I forget her name, Butler. She finally ended up leaving. Debbie Butler, yeah. She ended up leaving, going to the police department. She was pretty sharp. And then I worked with Mitzi, and Mitzi was a mess there. But she would keep us going all the time, keep us run an exercise thing every day, and we enjoyed that, and kept us going. Learned some stuff about how to count how many laps you did in the parking lot by putting nickels on the bumper of the truck, and then putting them back in your pocket when you got done. As far as being a firefighter again, yeah, I would do it again. It was a good career, and it was good to have time off with your family. But I know the family probably was missed you when you were gone. But then they could always come by the house, kind of come by the firehouse and see you, which was allowed back in those days. I don't know if it is still, but anyway, my wife and kids would come by, and kids would bring some of their toys and ride around the trucks and everything, which some of the captains didn't appreciate that. But we always had a good time. Sometimes some of the firefighters' wives would come and eat with us, which was nice to have some different people and you talk to and all. And Bobby Strong, we met his whole family by them coming to the firehouse and eating, but he was the only one that I remember his family coming often. As far as any state organizations being active in I wasn't in anything like that as far as the fire department. I ended up joining the Theatrical Stage Employees Union, and did that for, well, after I got a union card, I did that for about 19 years. But I worked, they'd call me every once in a while, and I'd go and work a show, putting it in and taking it out is all we'd do, maybe 2 or 3 a year. But then after I got a card, then I was working all the time. They would call me for everything. Fire department union, I was, what do you call it? I collected the dues until somebody else wanted that job, and in fact, Doug Christian took over when I guess they voted. I don't know if there was such a thing, voting you in or out. But anyway, he wanted it. He wanted a job, so I wasn't sad to get rid of it. As far as firefighters' wives, they play a intricate part in everything going on, because they have to take care of the kids and all that before while you're gone, and maybe do some maintenance at the house, you know. And my wife was really good at that. She handled things, and then she worked full time as a operating room nurse for Cohen Hospital for the whole time I was with the fire department. So she had a big load on her shoulders while I was gone. And then of course when I came home, she'd always leave me a list what I had to do. So I think faith plays a big part in a firefighter's life. When we first opened Station 5, one of the churches sent somebody over to have a Bible study. I guess it was a thing on Sunday morning, and those guys who come and taught, they were away from their church, and that was kind of a sacrifice for them too. And of course we were about all of us sit in on it. There was a couple of them that didn't, and I didn't at first, because I was practicing Catholic at that time, and the Catholic Church just was weird about stuff. But then I got to talking to the guy who come, and I don't remember his name, but he come and taught a Sunday school lesson, and got to talking to him after this thing. He was getting ready to leave, so I says, you know what? I'm gonna come and listen to you next time. So anyway, we started doing that, and then, like I said, I was practicing Catholic, so I would go to Catholic Mass right after I'd get off at the firehouse. If I was working Saturday, you know, I'd get off 8 o'clock in the morning, so I'd go to Mass on Sunday morning. But then my wife, she was a Baptist, and they were going to South Elm Street Baptist, and that's where her sister Rosalie Crane went, and Michelle, and all that group, and so I would go with her too. So that service was like at 10:30, so I do 2 services that same day. But then I got to listening, and the Baptist or the Protestant religion made more sense than what the Catholic Church was teaching. And there was some stuff they were teaching that wasn't in the Bible, so I think it played a part in my life to have some religion in place, and a lot of times you'd see guys just bow their head when we'd get a call. Yes, I have. I started out with kin folks that were working at the city, and my first, it wasn't kin to me, it was kin to my wife. Her uncle was a police officer, Sam Briggs, and he was worked at the jail for several years, and was almost killed there when some boy got one of the police officer's guns and actually ended up killing that police officer with his own gun, and fired several shots at the group when the elevator opened. The police were bad about hurting people on the elevator at that time, and probably years before that too. But anyway, he was the first one that was working for the city, and then his niece, Rosalie Crane, got a job with the city, and I think she was like only 18 or maybe younger, I don't know, got a job with the city. So that was the only one that was working for the city at that time. But then Rosalie ended up getting married later on, and her husband worked for the Parks Department for a while. And then her daughter worked for the city, Michelle. And then actually her son, Michelle's son, Michael, he's working for the Parks Department now. I think he told me he's been there 19 years. And my children, both of my sons ended up working for the city when they got out of the military. So they did their 30 years. And my youngest son, Andy, he did 29 years, and then went to work for the Guilford County School Bus Garage and worked for them another 3 years. Now he's with the Thomas Bus right now. As far as my health, I've got some problems with breathing, and that's probably something related to the fire department, but I'm thinking it's mainly related to the ships I was on. I served 4 years in the Navy, and back in those days, there were Second World War ships, and they were covered with, all the pipes were covered with asbestos. And when you were at sea, you walked through a compartment, it looked like a fog in there, with all the loose asbestos flying in the air. And of course, my hearing is bad from, sometimes we'd go to sea, we'd fire those 5-inch guns over 100 times. And of course, we were sitting right next to the bell and the siren on the truck when we were on the fire call. So I think probably that's got a lot to do with it. And the only thing I've had to have, I broke my nose, I think. I don't know when. I think probably when I was young, and they had to go in there and fix that. And then I've had some back problems, and that's mainly started when I was in service. And then I ended up having to have a hip replacement. That was about the only thing that I've had replaced. But that was from an earlier injury too, when I was young. As far as the fire department remembering me, I was a pretty good guy. I didn't have any problems with anybody. I don't remember ever getting ill with anybody. In fact, I've had some really good friends, and still, the ones that are still alive, I still talk to and everything. But of course, a lot of them have gone on, and miss them. As far as advice to a new guy coming in, I think I could give him some good advice about, mainly about remembering his family, about sacrifice that they go through.
That's good.
As far as my family wanting to remember stuff about me, I was pretty helpful dad. Helping my children build their houses. Maybe not monetary wise, they all seem to have the money to do it, but as far as advising them on what to do and going in there and helping them do it or doing it for them, I've been really good at that. Helped my brother build his house, both of my sons, and my daughter, I helped her do a lot of renovations on the place she lives up in the mountains. As far as some of the things that I missed, Well, like I say, I had a good career, and after 30 years, you really don't want to keep, putting your body through all this. You need a rest. I guess I was pretty young when I left. I was 51, which I told Mitzi one day when we were on a call. I says, Mitzi, I says, you better keep your strength up because you might have to pull my ass out of here. Some people you had to kind of worry if they were able to take care of you if something happened. I think that one of the things you mentioned that, well, me and we did a lot of physical stuff when I was at 14, when Mitzi, because she was teaching a class at some fitness center, so she would come and do the same kind of stuff at the firehouse, and some of us, me and Larry Harris. Larry Harris, yeah. Sometimes I get the we would participate. Charles wouldn't. Galloway, he wouldn't participate. But then they had another couple that would come in, and every evening they'd come in and they'd do it with us too. And so we'd have different things that Mitzi would teach us to do and helped a lot. And then she'd walk, so I'd walk with her a lot of times, I tell you, well, Richard Johnson, he was a chief, and he was up in the office, and I went to him one day because I know the fire department at one time, they didn't want people to be in the military while they were on the department. I know Moon Wyrick, he was against that completely. In fact, he frowned on people. He didn't even take their military experiences into consideration for advancement and everything like that. But anyway, I talked to Richard, and when I decided to go back and finish my 20 years in the Navy, I talked to him, and he says, if you want to do that sounds like a good plan to me. So he kind of talked me into it, going back, and he didn't talk me into it. I was already going to do it, whether he approved of it or not. But he was kind of in favor of it. He said, that's a good thing to do for your family. So, and I'm glad I did, because my wife, was covered by TRICARE and all that stuff. And before I lost her, we had 56 years together, so that was.
In closing, the Greensboro Firefighters History Book Committee hopes you have gained a greater insight into the dangers, the challenges, and emotional events that have influenced and shaped the American firefighter.